Welcome to the Environmental Crimes Financial Toolkit podcast, where we explore the fastest growing threats at the intersection of environmental destruction and financial crime. Environmental crimes, illegal logging, wildlife trafficking, illegal mining, and other offences generate hundreds of billions of dollars annually. These aren't just conservation issues. They're sophisticated financial crime operations involving money laundering, corruption, and transnational organised crime networks that move illicit proceeds through the global financial system. This podcast series brings together the people on the front lines of this fight: financial crime experts, environmental investigators, law enforcement officials, regulators, and banking practitioners. Together, we'll examine how environmental crimes actually work as financial operations, what red flags financial institutions should watch out for, and how better collaboration between sectors can disrupt these networks. Whether you're a compliance professional trying to understand environmental crime risks, a regulator developing policy, or simply interested in how financial systems enable and can help stop environmental destruction, this series will give you practical insights and real-world perspectives. I'm Olivia Dakeen, and this is the Environmental Crimes Financial Toolkit podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Sarah Maston, an award-winning inventor who's pioneered conservation technology solutions and is focused on using them to disrupt wildlife crimes. Sarah is the founder of Microsoft's Project 15 open platform for conservation and ecological sustainability, which she developed in partnership with the UN Development Programme to accelerate conservation tech across thousands of NGO projects globally. She's co-chair of the Impact Technology Champions Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime and is a global thought leader on using technology to fight environmental crime and the power of public-private partnerships. Sarah, welcome.
Hi.
So, Sarah, you've pioneered technology solutions for conservation and combating environmental crime through Project 15 and your work with organisations like the UN and United for Wildlife. How do you think technology can help address some of the detection and intelligence gaps that we're always hearing about? And what role does conservation tech play in identifying and disrupting wildlife trafficking?
Let's unpack that question in a few sections because, it's a huge question and it's a huge opportunity that we have with technology. I think as, the world gets more advanced, more connected, that's using technology to become connected. And I think if you're going to untie a knot, you need to use the same tools that it's being tied with. So as you start to see some of the advancements across the different industries involved, and this I think is the key part of this. So when you're looking at, fighting environmental crime and you're looking across the financial sector, you're looking across, the developments going on in conservation technology, you're looking at what's going on over here in transportation. There are so many layers to this problem that I think the only way that you can map them, start to understand them, and start to connect them is going to be with a technological solution. Now, this, I feel, is where it gets really, really tricky. And you mentioned Project 15. So yes, I was the founder of a project called Project 15 from Microsoft. And in my day job, I've been a data architect, a process architect. If you're having trouble sleeping, you can read a patent I wrote on graph theory applied to nutrition when I was back at IBM. But when you think about all these different types of technology, and then you think of all the different types of research, it really takes a strong partnership across very deep knowledge in different disciplines. And so, when we start to think about that and how are we going to work together, you mentioned United for Wildlife. It's an incredible initiative to start to join all these different players in this fight. So yeah, I'd love to touch on any of those because when you start to get into it, it's such a complex community that's coming together almost for not the first time, but really in a way that maybe they haven't come together before.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know sort of on that note that you've worked on some public-private partnerships, bringing together those sort of disparate elements, perhaps through your work with Microsoft and the UN and other conservation organisations. In your view, what makes a public-private partnership on wildlife crime actually effective? And what are the kind of common challenges or failures you see as well?
I think there's a challenge around knowledge in the sense that if you're someone like me, it takes a great deal of, I would guess, patience to get to, I've certainly had so many mentors now in this space. So I'd have to call out, I've been a technical advisor for a few organizations. And so you look at the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime, this is a very policy focused group. And so when it comes to understanding what policy work is happening, and so that, that's led by John Scanlon, And he's taken the time to say, okay, well, here's how this mechanism works. And you may not realize how many policy decisions are involved when it comes to technology, how many agreements exist in the world that someone could say, hey, somebody's going to fly from this place to that place, and you just don't get maybe how much that's important. If you're strictly, I'm a data scientist, I like to crunch data, I want to make a knowledge graph. And so that's one aspect of it, is there's a lot of learning that you have to have it's a growth mindset to come in and say, I don't know everything about this. And then really having an open mind that somebody that has a very different discipline than you do might know something that could be a key that unlocks something. And I know that as we get older in my learning curve, and so as we get older, sometimes we have a habit of kind of closing down to something that maybe somebody who's younger in career and can offer up an idea, and we need to be open to those ideas and let those folks in, just and accept that they may not know everything, but that's really, we can teach that way. So that's one thing about partnership I think is really important, especially when you start getting into public sector versus private sector. The other thing that I think is truly key, and I have felt for a long time and done a few talks. So a few of your listeners might have seen me at the Jeff Assembly in Vancouver or some other events where I really talk about scale. I'm very, very interested in how do we scale these solutions in a system where some of these maybe more private sector concepts of scale are not being brought in to the solutions being funded in the public sector or maybe the NGO space. And so that aspect of private public partnership, I'm really a fierce advocate of how do we partner better? How do we educate both sides on what is the role of free cloud credits and what isn't the role of free cloud credits? If you're dependent on, hey, we got some free credits and we're going to go build it on whichever cloud or hyperscaler, that's great, but that cloud bill is always going to come. And so what kind of sustainable business model are you developing that can really support your idea, your solution outside of kind of a proof of concept? And so I talk a lot around proof of concept purgatory. And just so you know, lots of private sector projects, they wind up never getting past that stage. It's kind of a, it's just a sort of a bane of the existence of the inventor. But how do we really come up with systematic change so that I don't hear as much feedback from those sort of in the NGO space that are very frustrated around, hey, I had this great idea, we got funded, but then it got stale and people moved on, whatever. So that aspect of partnership across our domains, I think, is important to start talking about. And the other thing is not just the money of the private sector. I did a few talks, I think it was around 2020, and it was really about the 3 Ps and the private public partnership. And really it's not just funding. You need our skills. And so how do we create opportunities where I represent a whole army of nerds, really. I'm a nerd, I'm a data nerd, and we really want to help, but we need to figure out ways where we can help in a sustainable way and still pay rent. It can't be just volunteer work and tech for good hackathons, because I've heard feedback that there's almost a sense of a broken promise of the private sector's hackathons. And but there isn't a real, well, that's not people's day job. They're giving up their extra hours. And that was one of the struggles my co-founder, Daisuke Nakahara, and I, when we did Project 15, is that the more people found out that we could help them or wanted to help them, the more it was our nights and weekends until it became unsustainable. So how do we get these private sector, skills to come in and help, but also not be a conflict with day jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that part in the first part of your answer around the humility around admitting our knowledge gaps. That's really good. And I think we absolutely do need you in your army of nerds. So from the technology and data side, do you think that there are any red flags for wildlife crime, if we're getting a bit more specific now and into the detail, that could detected more systematically? Are there technology solutions that you think could help financial institutions to spot these patterns and maybe close down some of their blind spots?
There's some great solutions out there. I know about a few. There's Quantifind is one that I've seen how we're using. I believe it's sort of a graph-based, a knowledge graph-based to go find those flags. If it's not, apologies. Give me an email and say, no, Sarah, that's not how it works at all. I'll say, oh, okay. But any sort of graph-based technology is going to work. And for those of you that maybe aren't as technical, or you're going to raise your hands up and say, no, I'm not technical, I say, come on, everyone can learn. So graph-based technology or graph databases are relationship first. So there's two really big schools of databases, and one of them is a relational database with tables and queries and joins and things, and you might have heard of those. And then there's graph based, where you have nodes and edges, and these edges connect different entities about the relationship between this node and that node. You're all part of one on LinkedIn and Facebook and all of those. So when you think about what is the relationship of this airplane ticket and that person and that other bit of information you found in a financial system, it's really one of the only data structures that's able to start connecting those dots. And so when I think about systems that can think about, hey, let's find some red flags, those technologies are really something that you probably want to invest in or learn about, because that's how you're going to bring those up. And it's the same technology, just as a real world example, these recommendation engines that you all see when you go shopping and you buy one thing and then suddenly there's a whole bunch of shoes that show up, or hey, wouldn't you like this, the quote unquote algorithm of social media. That's really done by a graph, by knowing what you like or what you've clicked on, and then being able to give you more things that they think you might like to drive, engagement. So if you really take that idea and apply it towards, we want to go find some red flags, you start looking at patterns and then seeing where those other patterns start to appear and lifting up those as, hey, is this a red flag? And then a human intervention there, an expert coming in and saying, oh yeah, oh that, yep, click, and then sort of teaching the machine that way. Of course, there's been so much advancements in the last 5 years in AI, so I'm not even super familiar with some of the new stuff coming around with the abilities of Gen AI and all the different models that have shown up.
That was still a very technologically impressive answer to me. So if we're staying with that technology perspective, obviously given your expertise, is there something that really kind of keeps you up at night in relation to the sort of the threat to the world, and what kind of emerging threats are you seeing? What innovations are you and or other people working on to try and counter them?
Yes, I see this as very much an enigma problem, that the longer it takes us to figure out solutions, the more it disappears. I like to reference the Imitation Game movie a lot. The amount of chance that the world took on Alan Turing to solve that, the first enigma problem. And so I really think of it that way. And it's why I named my project back in the day Project 15, because it was named after us losing an elephant every 15 minutes. And you always kept that in mind, that in this podcast, we will spend 30 minutes or whatever number of minutes, and how many species, plants, people, how many people are affected within that time. So what keeps me up is the number of people that I know have dedicated their entire lives, their entire career, to finding solutions to this problem across law enforcement, across policymakers, across all of it, financial folks, investigators, yourself. And I think about that as someone who showed up on the scene relatively recently in my own career. And it keeps me up because, how do we help you? And in my community of friends and contacts, and especially, those sort of in the big tech offices in the world who can shine lights on this problem, it's why I left my corporate role to kind of boots on the ground. How can I really get in here, start to learn, start to research, to really build something that can help? And so that's what keeps me up, is the number of people I know that have spent their whole lives and just watched everything continue to decline. And then how can I come in and help in the smallest way, or perhaps we'll find something that does create profound change, because it is just hard to watch. I have children, I don't want this world to descend. I want it to get back to homeostasis and then to heal. And that's what keeps me up.
It's an incredibly inspiring answer. Thank you, Sarah. So before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance for a final thought, perhaps. If there was one message that you could give to financial institutions and the private sector to really take away from this conversation today.
I think it's finding new ways to partner. I think it's breaking outside. There's very great channels of partnership. I know we've talked a little bit about United for Wildlife, and that's it's impressive when you think about ecosystems, partner ecosystems, and how technology works is that we leverage a technical partner ecosystem. And I don't know how much other industries truly know how that works. But to get to scale, if you have a smartwatch, that's just not made by one company. It's made by probably over 100 companies that come together and put a label on it, and you think it's by one company. Or a smart coffee machine. It could be made somewhere different. The app is made from a different company, the web page. So we all come together and we create this product with many different experts and different bits and pieces of it. I see a lot of solutions. I see a lot of people leaning in to try to, hey, I want to go find the solution. And we know what that problem is, but maybe there's a different problem to solve and then we're missing it. And so that's really my hope, is to say, how can we all partner together? Because the solution may not be able to live in one house. It might have to live in many different houses, and you have to stitch those together into a tapestry that becomes our solution. And that's really that, there's never going to be one platform to rule them all. You can't get everybody's data in one place and then do intelligence on it. That's not how the world works. So I think it's really, learning about how the power of partnership in the technology space works so that you can apply it into your own space, because the answer will come through technology that then enables those on the ground to win, this battle.
Very good thought. Very good takeaway. Thank you. Sarah Maston, co-chair of the Impact Technology Champions Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime and founder of Microsoft's Project 15. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Next week, continuing our discussions on law enforcement's responses to environmental crime, we'll be speaking with Kevin Lax-Kelly, head of the UK National Wildlife Crime Unit. You can find more information about the Environmental Crimes Financial Toolkit at wearethemis.com/UK. Thanks for listening.